ultimately what you want is you do all the work and then you throw it out the window and you show up on the day and basically say, F it. And there you are present, listening. And what comes up is what comes up. How you're affected is how you're affected. I think when I was younger, there was more of a impulse towards trying to dominate the thing, or like put my ideas on it, or like do it this way because I thought that that was right. And it was partly a real earnest desire to be good, and partly fear that if I didn't kind of like really grab it, it would get away from me.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Tom Pelphrey is an actor. His latest role is Ben on the third season of Ozark. He sat down with me in cyberspace to talk about the work.
I heard you tell a story about going over Laura Linney's house. She invited you over, you went over, and the way you describe it is you kind of adopted her approach to the script in a way, and you said that was really helpful. I'm so curious about this. Didn't you already have a way, though, that you approached scripts? You must have had. And what was important about seeing the way she was doing it and adopting it for yourself?
Yeah, that was a really cool day in the life of an actor, to go over to Laura Linney's house on a Sunday afternoon and have her sort of share how she's working on her scripts. And so, yeah, I definitely had a method of my own, but what Laura was doing was just far more regimented, far more thorough, and far more organized. And this is especially important, I think, when you're working on the TV show. And so most of the episodes we were doing we would be filming 2 episodes at a time. They call that a block. I'm sure you know that. But as we were approaching the end of the season, episodes 7, 8, 9, 10 were a 4-episode block, which is something I've never done before. So that's you're trying to wrap your head around 4 hours of what you're going to be filming, which is roughly 4 to 240 pages. And you're trying to keep straight in your head where you are on each particular day. For instance, maybe Thursday morning, we're going to be filming a part of episode 7, but then Thursday night, I have to film the scene from episode 9. And so this becomes super important because, so much of your work as an actor, at least for me, I feel this way, is like the script gives you A and Z. The script is telling you, this is where we're going to start. This is what the middle looks like. This is where we're going to end. And then it's really your job to bring that to life. And I think to do that in an intelligent way and in a dynamic way, you're very mindful of that. You're very mindful of, if this is a painting and these are the colors you want to use, you're mindful of working them in and how you use, that's part of, I think, the job. And so, especially with the character Ben being bipolar, there was a lot to consider because, in particular, in the last 4 episodes, after Ben has stopped taking his medication, just, sort of medically, research-wise, keeping track of how much time has gone by that he now isn't on the medication, how much is that affecting his behavior and all of these things. So I say all that to say I was feeling good about the work I was doing, but I saw Laura come to set one day with this massive binder, and I always come with my scripts in a binder too, but like hers seemed like that's impossible. Is that every season of Ozark? And there she is sitting in her chair, opening it up, looking. she's got notes. I don't understand everything that's there. And then I ask her what she's doing, and she shows me. I'm like, this is excellent. Like, what an excellent way to organize your script. And so then, yes, she invites me over, and we work on a system where there is sort of notation for each episode on like a big poster that you can keep at home. So sort of like visual reference for wherever you work. And then, and then working the scripts and the notes into the binder so that that's something you can bring with you to set. But it was, I mean, insanely helpful. And also some of the things that you would think are obvious, you might miss unless you're working that carefully. Right. You know, like I just had a few things occur to me that I have to admit would have passed me by if I hadn't just been working that thoroughly. And here's the thing is, like, some of that work is just plotting. It's just time. It's just going over the script again. It's just writing these things out. But there's a real advantage to that. You know, part of, I think, why she does it the way she does, and she even said as much, was that it forces you to spend so much time with the script. Mm-hmm. You know, like, if I'm going to do this poster, and if I'm going to do these notes, and if I'm going to track, like, what's this and what time is it, and if this day starts in this scene, then what time is it when it's just stuff that doesn't necessarily show up on the screen, but it forces you as an actor back into the script, back into the script, back into the script, back into the script. So by the time you're filming, you know that script back in front, and that can lead to a sort of freedom, which is ultimately what you want, right? So for me, it's like, you want all the information possible. So you get that from the script, you get that from your research. Then you want all the confidence possible, which to me is sort of intertwined in the first thing, right? Yes. It's like the confidence comes from having done the work and feeling good about it. And the blend of the two is to me what allows for the creativity. You know, because if you're coming in and, to me, not having done the work and just making choices, it could be very interesting, and oftentimes I think it is, but is it serving the story? Yes. Versus these writers are planning this amazing journey for us. These scripts are literally the architect's blueprints. Like, we have so many subcontractors coming to this house to work. We have the plumbers, we have the electricians, we have the roofer, we have the, person installing the AC and the heat. Like, there's so many people who have to come here and do a job, and we're all working off this one thing, this one architect's blueprint. This is the script. And like, so again, I think the more that everyone is into the script, the more it's cohesive. And yet I do believe that kind of work ethic does lead to, like, well, now I feel so comfortable, and now I know exactly, I feel that I know exactly where we are and what we're going for. Now I feel really open to explore my options.
Mm-hmm. So two things there that you're making me think about. First of all, we all know, I think, of performances that are kind of like you're talking about, which is like, they're doing something amazing, but it's not in service of the ultimate thing. And it's like, you're like, why does this not feel right? They're really doing a good job. Like, they feel authentic, they feel connected, but something is not right with their connection and with the story or something. Mm-hmm. Like, I think audiences feel that. Sometimes I feel like people think if you do too much work in that, you can't be free. You just explained to us how putting the work in is actually freeing. And I think people really do think that. They think, oh, no. If I get locked up in that, I can't access just my spontaneity, and that's wrong.
Peter, I thought the same thing when I was younger. I absolutely 100% was convinced of that when I was younger. And part of that was I was pretty good sometimes, and I didn't fully understand it, and I didn't want to mess it up. I didn't want to get in the way of it. So the more that I could just leave it and look, there is absolutely 100% still so much of this that is kind of mysterious. Like, we can talk about work as much as we want, but the way that the alchemical process of that, like turning into what you see or whatever happens where that activates, and sometimes you surprise yourself, there's still a ton of mystery. But like, yes, I used to hold the whole thing over in the dark corner as a mystery and just be like, if I look at that too much, I'm not going to be able to do it again. And it's problematic because half the time I couldn't.
You had early success in soaps. Is there anything there that you keep saying, wow, I'm glad I had that soap experience, because that I kind of worked this all out during that time, and now I'm reaping the rewards of it, just in terms of your craft? And is there anything that you had to work on exhuming from that style of work in order to work in other mediums?
Yeah, it's interesting. As you were asking that question, it did sort of occur to me a way in which the soap was very helpful. I love my time there, and I'm always grateful for that job. But it just occurred to me another way that was very helpful because of the way they shot it. The sets would be proscenium style sets, and they would film 3 cameras simultaneously. So oddly enough, the way they filmed the soap, at least back then, was more similar to almost filming a live play than a TV show.
Right.
You know, because on the soap, at least back then, for the most part, you're not bringing in the cameras. You're not doing coverage where you have to stop and set up. You're never moving lights. You are moving lights, but you're never moving these whole setups. Like with a TV show, with a movie, it's like, okay, we do the master and then we stop. Then we're going to set up, Peter's coverage, and then we stop and we're going to do Tom's coverage. In the soap, it's kind of all, you have an 8-page scene, just go. We're going to move the cameras as we're going, live edit. And so there was probably a very helpful job to have to help me transition from all the theater into working in front of a camera. It was sort of like a bridge there. I never really thought about that like that. But yes, you do have to work very fast. You're doing like 60 pages a day. So the muscles that you work.
That's insane. Is that really true? 60?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, you're doing an hour. You're doing an hour of television 5 days a week.
That's right. I don't think about it like that. Oh my God.
And so the muscles that you work are memorization, shooting from the hip. You get really good at just having a good instinct, a good impulse, and honoring that. And again, as a young actor, 22 years old, I was surrounded by older actors who were very good examples of how to be on set. Hard workers, always on time, always prepared, treated everyone well around them. That's another part of early jobs that I think can be really formative for a young actor. And I was very lucky to have a very good experience in that way, like clear role models of this is how we behave. But then, on the downside, it was, sort of two sides of the same coin. Was the speed at which I learned how to work can be very detrimental for everything that we just talked about, because you're without time for process, you're jumping to results, because on the soap, in that environment, that's what you had to do. That is what that job dictated, which is fine. But when you have jobs where there is time for process, where you have much more time to explore, to work, to research, you don't want to be jumping right to results, because chances are, while you might jump to some interesting results, you're most often probably just going to jump to the most obvious result. And anyone can do that, and I think it's really in the process and in the working and in the taking time, in the, as I came to learn years later with Laura, in that kind of just working over and over and over something, that it can really become that you really pull it into yourself, and then you can really bring your specific individual full self to your work in a way that it's like, wow, that's a great role. A lot of actors would have done an amazing job, but that actor did an amazing job in the way that only they could do. And that I think is where you want to get, what you want to be working towards, because who knows if we ever get there. But like literally, I finished the soap and then I went back into a studio class in New York with a teacher who I really admired from Rutgers. She was never my teacher at Rutgers, but she had and has a fantastic studio class in the city. I jumped right in with her for 6 months and just had her tear me to shreds, and got to work again on scenes from plays, and got to have process, and got to really feel creative and slow, and purposefully was trying to fall on my face over and over again so that I could be reminded. It's like, it doesn't always have to be perfect. It doesn't always have to be right the first time, which on the soap, given the dictates of the machine, sort of needs to be that way, understandably.
Right. Something that keeps coming back up on this show, which I cannot fully wrap my arms around, is this idea that the actor should know what their character is doing in this story. Like, it's not just about character work in terms of psychology or something. This is almost like story craft, understanding what that role is doing in the story. And you tell a story about Chris Mundy, the showrunner for Ozark, giving you the whole storyline of what's going to happen with your character. And you said that was very helpful. And good actors keep talking about this over and over and over again. And I just keep thinking, like, I get it now. I understand it. But this is not like a character. Like, if you're trying to create reality, of course, this person that you're embodying doesn't know what's going to happen to them. I mean, is this a silly way to describe this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, moment to moment, they don't know that they're going to have this situation happen at a restaurant, weeks from now, or whatever. And just the idea of knowing that and how that is important is something that I keep hearing over and over again, but I want to hear you explain why that is true.
Here's what I think, and maybe this isn't two parts. First of all, when I had an amazing teacher in high school, an amazing teacher in college. My teacher in college, who was our first year acting teacher, is a director, but also a dramaturg. So he's really good at helping playwrights shape their plays. So it was drilled into my head that there is a hierarchy, and it goes playwright, most important, director, second most important, actor, third most important. And that was drilled, playwright, director, actor. And the reason is because, again, the playwright had created this thing, this universe, this story. They had, out of nowhere, created this thing. The rest of us were there in service of that idea, in service of that story. Doesn't mean that the actor isn't very important. It doesn't matter how good the script is and how good the direction is. If the actors don't bring it to life, it's dead on arrival. It doesn't matter. So, again, all of these things have to work together. But just to start to say, like, that was drilled into my head, that sort of order of importance. And so always for me is the idea, and kind of what I love about it is like being in service of the story, because that's, I mean, what are we doing? You know, like, what do you want to do? I want to be part of a really amazing story that people get to experience, maybe learn from or be moved by, that it can heal in some way or provide some relief. So there's that. Then when you don't know what's going to happen, I feel like you almost have to play it closer to the best for safety. You know, also, just technically being trained in the theater, like, so much of my training is or part of my training is how to read a script and take out the things I need from the script to build the character that is the correct character to slot into serving that story. You know, like, obviously there are certain characters in the story for a reason, and they serve a certain purpose. And if everyone's doing the right thing and serving their purpose, then we have the story that we want to tell. And hopefully the story that we want to tell when the writer wrote it is transformed by the director's input and the actor's input. And then you have an even cooler or more detailed or more honest story at the end of the thing. So to me, it's like, if you know where it's going, if I know this is A and you're telling me that's C, and you give me a rough idea of what we're going to do to get there, then again, it's the paint colors. It's the okay, well, if that's where the story's going to go, you know, down the line there, that's looking like a lot of red. You know, maybe don't paint everything red on the way there. You know,
that's maybe, a good one.
Maybe let's use some blue here. Maybe let's, you know, use some yellow here. And that's part of, you know, I think that's part of just like building out your journey and understanding your role inside the greater thing, which is to me, a really important part of being able to do your job. And then, the flip side of that is, if you don't know where you're going, you don't want to fall on your face. You know, like if I don't know where, just say a really silly example, just to illustrate the point, but like, if I have no idea where the story's going, and the character meets a girl, and it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna play this scene like I'm just totally smitten, in love, blah blah blah. And then, you know, the next episode, the next day, they're talking, and the character says, oh, I couldn't stand her. You know, that's a really obvious example, but it's like, well, that's information I really could have used retroactively before I played that scene. Like the time isn't linear in these worlds. Like I need all the information to understand like what the journey might look like. And, you know, so that's an obvious example, but that's kind of what I mean. It's like, if you don't know where something is going, I can only speak for myself. If I don't know where something's going, I feel a bit more guarded. I will be more likely to play things closer to the vest.
I don't know if you've seen Normal People. I talked to Paul Mescal. He did something with his character regarding his character's depression that really impacted people in a similar way to the way you impacted people with this performance, with your character's bipolar and other characteristics that people really responded to. And I asked him, but was there a duty, a responsibility toward this representation? I said, if you had a duty, I'm assuming that is not helpful to an actor, to have a duty or a responsibility toward playing this so that people can relate to it. It's not something that's useful moment to moment for an actor. But I know that from listening to other interviews, I mean, you did take this seriously. You know, a book that was very helpful to you called An Unquiet Mind, you kept going back to, and you did your research. But even research, all the research in the world is not everything in the moment. You know, you can't lean on the research. There's something that you did with this character moment to moment in just where you had to get to emotionally. I want to know what the ingredients were that went into the environment that helped you get to where you had to get to.
First of all, there is a responsibility. There is a responsibility. I feel like it's kind of your job. And I've always kind of felt that, and I guess I always will. Now, whether I succeed or not is another question. But yeah, I mean, I think in particular, you talked about, I haven't seen that show, Normal People, but you talked about depression, and obviously Ben's got bipolar. I think one of the most important things to remember with any mental illness is that this is still a very specific individual human being, so you do the research, but that comes in when it comes in at the right moments. Like, we're not playing a depressed guy. You're not playing a guy who's struggling with bipolar. Playing a human being. And at moments, their mental illness impacts their life in a way that is noticeable, that is tangible. And ideally, you have good writing that is helping you chart that course, which I very much did. Absolutely did. And that's really important, so that you're not coming in playing some damn idea, which is insulting to anyone who has mental illness.
Yeah.
It's like, everyone's just a person, but maybe in certain situations, or if they're not taking care of themselves the right way, or if they stop taking their medicine, life becomes more difficult for them in very specific ways. And that is what the research is, in those specific ways. And hopefully the writing mirrors the research, which again, in my case, it did. In these specific ways, this person's life's going to get more difficult. And then you tie that all together into the story, and boom. So that's the responsibility part for me. And then the environment that goes into, work, like that Ozark set is a very special place. And I'm not just saying that because it was just my job or I was just there. I was raised and mostly stick to, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. So if I'm saying something emphatically, I really mean it. I've just I don't think I've ever worked on a set where top to bottom it felt so kind and safe. And this is like, and it's rare. These are things that are cultivated from the top down. This is very much Chris Mundy. And you're not surprised that when you meet the man, that he is a highly intelligent, wonderfully kind, supportive, sweet, good human being. This is Jason Bateman. And again, he is what you hope he would be. Very kind, very relaxed, very encouraging, very funny. This is Laura Linney, again, this sort of icon that I've looked up to forever, who is what you hope she would be. This amazingly kind, very generous actress. And they set that tone, because it's like that tone permeates everything. It permeates the cast, it permeates the crew. There I am, season 3, halfway through the season, and I hear the crew members talking on a Friday night about what they're going to do together on Saturday. And I'm like, really? I mean, not only have we been doing this now for 2.5 months, 3 months, and we have to see each other all day, every day. You guys have been doing this for 3 years, and you still want to spend your one day off together? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, man, this place really is a magical place. Like, these things are not always happening on every set you work on. And especially with me and my character coming into the show, Laura was so kind with me and supportive and amazingly generous with her time on set, obviously off set at times, like just very there, very present, very encouraging. These things, it creates an atmosphere where you feel safe. I've heard the stories where directors think that maybe the best atmosphere is just to create chaos. Yeah. And that has its own place, and that has its own merits, I'm sure. And like, I think it's just an individual thing. I just think it's a personality thing. But in Ozark, it was the opposite, and it was very gentle. And what that does, at least for me, is like, I almost immediately felt like, because of the way they were treating me, I almost immediately felt as if I'd been there with them since season 1. And after just a few days around Laura, I felt like I really was a part of her family. She was treating me like I was her brother, you know, and not really, but like that, the feeling of that. And so, God, I mean, that what a gift. Like, these are the invisible things that you can't control, that if they aren't there, make life more difficult. And if they are there, it makes it feel like you're cheating, you know, because if I have to go on this show and I have to be, you know, Laura Linney's brother, and we grew up together and blah, 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 blah. You know, if we have no relationship, or if Laura and I had some kind of negative relationship in real life, it would be so much harder, because then everything is, there's what happens before we roll, and then there's what happens when we roll, and they're very different, and you have to like constantly like adjust, or like try and hold yourself in the right space, versus what actually happened, which is a go there. Laura's so kind, so cool, so like interested, supportive, collaborating on scenes. We're talking about things. She wants my opinion. She wants to hear what I'm thinking. So that the give and take, the sort of energetic flow between us, is always brother, sister, always loving, it's always supportive, it's always gentle. I know she has my back. She knows I have hers. And so now this is the flow we've created, and now the cameras start rolling, and nothing needs to change.
Right.
Now, obviously, you become different. Now I'm Ben. Now she's Wendy. My accent's different. Like, those things change, but like that invisible energy, which is such a huge part that like you can't teach, you can't talk about, you just kind of have to hope that the other actor is willing to do that with you, or that you have a really great director who understands how to cultivate that and sort of pushes you all in the right direction. Man, when that's there, it is such a gift. And it really, really, really was such a gift, what Laura gave me. I actually feel emotional talking about it now. And it shows up in real ways, like the amount of times we're doing scenes where, you know, I'd done all my work, and then I'd done my work the way Laura showed me how to work, you know, couldn't be more prepared, coming in with a certain idea of what a scene is going to be, and then sitting across from this human being that I feel very connected to, and suddenly we're on take 3, take 4, and something lands on her in a different way, and she's emotional, and suddenly I am. Because I'm so with her. I'm so connected to her. I love this person. And like, those are, I could spend this entire time talking about how highly I think of Laura Linney, and what a gift it is to work with an actor like that. What a gift.
But you had to do things in some of these scenes, Tom. You know, like it seems like all the ingredients were there, including the writing, right? I mean, it's not just the people that were actually there. You had amazing writing. But, you know, I talked to Carol Baker. She said on Baby Doll, the hardest scene was when she had to laugh and then cry and then laugh in the same scene. That was the hardest one to do. You have to do this, or a variation of that, like 2 or 3 times in this. I mean, there's the scene in the car where you're laughing, you're eating fries. You know, I mean, this is typical bipolar moment here, but you have to embody this. You're laughing, and then you're breaking down. And then a moment later, you're laughing again in the scene. And it's not like there's nothing inauthentic about those 3 transitions that happen. When you know that has to happen during that scene, what is it that you need to have happen to get there?
Well, look, there's no easy answer here. But I'll say this. maybe let's talk about this part of it. Is like, you have this instrument, right? And it's receptive to meaning that causes response. And when I was younger, when I was in high school and college, 19, 20, took a long time for me to connect myself to like a meaning outside of myself. Like, it took a long time to emotionally connect myself to a character, whatever. It'd take a while to get in the right headspace, and it would take a while to calm down after, like a muscle, just like anything else. And over time, hopefully, if you're working the right way and you're being honest, and hopefully you have the opportunity to work with some people who help you and you learn from, that muscle gets stronger. Simultaneously, your instrument is your body, but also your instrument is your mind. That's yours. I'm speaking hesitantly because what we're talking about, I think, is a delicate thing. And I don't want to say something that isn't true. And I also don't want to say something that's reductive. But, I talked before about leaving the soap and going to the studio class of Deborah Headwall, who's an amazing, incredible actress and an amazing teacher. And she would say, your job is to expand yourself. Like, go out, read poetry, go to museums, read great novels, have experiences, fall in love, get betrayed, blah, blah, blah. This can sound kind of cheesy, but it's so true. Like, basically, go have a human experience and be aware of it and integrate it into yourself so that you are, as a human being, having the fullest experience possible, so that when you're asked to do your job within all of this possibility, this job needs this. Okay. I know that. I know some version of that. I've felt like that at times, and now I can touch that when I need to for work, for this, particular purpose. And so I guess part of my answer is, these things, it's just part of a long journey. At least for me, this is ultimately what you want. And I guess what I'm saying is, I couldn't do this in the beginning, and I feel more comfortable doing this now. It's ultimately what you want is, you do all the work and then you throw it out the window, and you show up on the day and basically say, F it. And there you are, present, listening. And what comes up is what comes up. How you're affected is how you're affected. I think when I was younger, there was more of a impulse towards trying to dominate the thing, or like put my ideas on it, or like do it this way because I thought that was right. And, it was partly a real earnest desire to be good, and partly fear that if I didn't kind of like really grab it, it would get away from me. I know I really appreciate when someone's articulate, and I'm very aware at how inarticulate I'm being. I'm sort of like taking little threads and then like kind of like pulling you along, and then dropping it before I finish. I've done that about 3 times now, but but maybe what I'm saying is, there's no way to directly answer that question, and so I'm sort of like I don't know, like swatting around it. Like I'm sort of like shading around it so that in the absence of it, you can kind of see its shape.
Michael Kelly, who was on House of Cards, was on my show, but he was also in Mindhunter. And he has a story about David Fincher about like 50 takes in a scene, and him getting directions from Fincher that were so minuscule, and suddenly he realized like he wasn't even like feeling at all in the moment, and then he was very frustrated. said cut. There was lunch, and he goes up to Fincher and he says, I'm sorry, man. I don't know what you were saying stuff. It was like not helping. I'm sorry. I feel like I was terrible. And Fincher goes, no, it wasn't you, man, at all. The extras were really robotic for the first like 30 takes. And so I had to keep it going. I want to know if that story brings up any stories from the set of Mank. And if not, then I just want to know, is there anything you can say about working with this master and the way he works?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. He's a master. I mean, he is so good at what he does. As far as the many takes go, I love it. Sign me up. You're telling me I get to go to work and play a scene 90 times with Gary Oldman and David Fincher's giving me notes? Like, yeah, dude, let's do 150. I mean, I swear, it didn't matter how many takes we did. Every time David said cut, we moved on. I was like, part of me was like, oh, I kind of wanted to do one more. Like, if you're telling me that you're going to pay me to go do that for a day, bring it on. You could get, I swear to God, bring it on. And I loved it. And I loved working with David. I loved it. I'll say this about him, which was so cool to kind of realize. Like, at one point, Gary and I were walking and we sort of turn a corner and the camera watches us walk. And David was like, I need you to sort of adjust the angle on the walk a bit. And it was very small. And we tried to do it again and it didn't work. And basically he taped out exactly the line, whatever. And just so we could see it, because he had to pull it up before we filmed. So like, it was really meticulous about exactly the angle of this walk. And then we walk the line, we film it and we do it. And while he's putting down the tape, you know, Gary's sort of watching him and he's like looking at me and smiling. And then David comes over and Gary says, "Bit specific, David." And and David goes, come here. And he brings us to the corner where we just walked around and he says, you see that pillar, the third one back is like in a bit, and then this one's out a bit. And I was looking and I didn't see anything. I didn't, you know what I mean? But he did. And therefore he knows visually that wants to be perpendicular, you know. Yes. And so he is basing the angle on the angle that he sees in the wall that I truly cannot see. And that's when I realized, I was like, his eye is seeing things that other people are not seeing. Like, his ability to see insane amounts of detail inside of a space is part of his insane, beautiful gift. Yeah. And when you realize like, there's not going to be a frame that isn't gorgeous or perfect, which is like, first of all, as an actor, isn't that what you want? Isn't that exactly the kind of job you want to be in? And then secondly, if you're doing a lot of takes and getting a lot of notes, chances are, as in Michael's story, it's not about you. And even if it is about you, it's not a personal thing. It might also not be an issue of good or bad, right or wrong.
Yes.
It might just be an issue of how it looked. You know what I mean? So I loved the experience. I felt like I learned so much. I just personally was excited to be there. I was up for however many takes we wanted to do. And as much as I could, you know, there's a great Rumi quote, "Don't be humble with fools and don't bring pride into the presence of a master." And, you know, on that set, I was, you know, lips closed, ears open, because I'm getting to work with David Fincher and Gary Oldman, and I was trying to soak up everything I could, much like working with Laura Linney, you know.
Tom Pelphrey, thank you so much.
And Peter, can I say thank you so much? I really enjoyed this interview. You're excellent, so well prepared. I really loved the things we talked about, and it felt fun to do. So thank you for having me.
That makes me feel good, man. I appreciate that.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.